"Can everyone head to the conference room real quick?" That's how he said it. Casual, like he was about to tell us the parking lot was getting repaved or something. I remember looking up from my desk and checking the clock on my monitor. 40:48 p.m. on a Friday. That detail stuck in my head because nothing good ever gets announced at 48 p.m. on a Friday. That's the time slot reserved for bad news dressed up in calm voices. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 57 years old. Until about 90 days ago, I was Senior Director of Operations at Caldwell Dynamics, 14 years. I started there when my son was in middle school. I was there through 2 recessions, 3 CEOs, and 1 complete rebrand that cost the company $4 million and gave us a new logo that looked like a misshapen paperclip. I knew where every body was buried, every system was patched, every client relationship had been stitched back together after someone upstairs made a bad call. That place ran the way it did largely because of people like me. None of that mattered on that Friday afternoon. I walked into the conference room and did a quick count without thinking about it. 14 of us. I noticed the stack of manila envelopes on the table next to Cody Harlan's coffee cup before I noticed anything else. 14 envelopes, 1 for each of us. I had been in enough of these rooms over the years to know what that stack meant. Cody Harlan was 34 years old. He'd been at Caldwell for 3 years. His father, Gerald Harlan, had been on the company's board of directors for 11 years. You do the math on how Cody ended up running our division at 34 with a resume that would have gotten most people a mid-level coordinator role. He wore good suits. He talked fast in meetings. He had his father's handshake and his father's ability to take credit for things other people built. He stood at the head of the table, waited for the last few people to filter in, and then pulled out his phone. Before we get into this, he said, "I want to share something." He turned the phone screen toward us. It was a screenshot of a compensation summary. His name at the top, a number I won't repeat here, but the percentage increase was 45%. Board approved my restructuring proposal this morning. 45% adjustment, outstanding leadership during a challenging period. They said, he put the phone away. Effective today, each of you is being released as part of a strategic realignment. HR has your transition packets. Security will assist with your belongings. The room didn't make a sound. Not one person said anything. You could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. Then Cody reached into his bag and set a bottle of single malt scotch on the table. He cracked the seal, poured himself 2 fingers into a coffee mug, and raised it slightly in our direction. "Nothing personal," he said. "Just math." I watched him take that sip and I thought about 14 years. I thought about the Hartfield Group deal I'd spent 8 months building from a cold introduction to a signed partnership worth more than anything Caldwell had closed in a decade. I thought about the nights I stayed late running numbers, the weekends I spent on calls with their procurement team. The moment 6 weeks earlier when we finally got the signature and I shook hands with their CTO in a conference room downtown and felt genuinely proud of something. I thought about my son starting grad school in the fall, about the mortgage extension I'd signed the month before, betting on the Hartfield bonus to cover the gap. I picked up my envelope and walked out. We all ended up in the parking lot. Nobody planned it. We just sort of drifted out there together, holding cardboard boxes and small plants and framed photos, standing in the late afternoon sun like people who had just been told something they still hadn't fully processed. Phil Greer from logistics was standing near his truck, not moving. Phil had been at Caldwell almost as long as I had. His youngest daughter had just graduated college in May. He'd talked about that constantly for the last year, how he was finally about to catch a break, get some breathing room. He had the look of a man doing very quick and very bad mental arithmetic. Sandra Okafor from accounting was on her phone, probably calling her husband. She was 3 years from retirement. 3 years. She had mentioned her timeline at the last department birthday lunch, laughing about it, saying she had it down to the month. Now she was standing in a parking lot on a Friday afternoon holding a small cactus she kept on her desk. Nadine Flowers had been our compliance officer for 9 years. She had caught more contract errors and billing discrepancies than anyone in the building and had never once gotten a formal commendation for it. She was just standing there looking at her envelope like she was deciding whether to open it. I said something out loud. I don't even remember exactly what. Something about how this wasn't right. Nobody argued, nobody disagreed, but there wasn't much to say. He could do it, he did do it, his father was on the board. The board approved his proposal. The math worked out fine for everyone who wasn't in that parking lot. I drove home, I made dinner. I watched the news without taking in a word of it. I went to bed and lay there thinking until about 3 a.m., running through everything, trying to figure out what a 57-year-old man with a mortgage and a kid in grad school is supposed to do when something like this happens. The answer I kept coming back to was, update your resume, apply for unemployment, say company restructuring and job interviews with a calm voice, and move on. I almost did that. 2 weeks later, the LinkedIn notification changed everything. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. I saw it because someone shared it on LinkedIn with a congratulations tag and 14 clapping hands emojis. Cody Harlan named Executive Vice President following successful close of landmark Hartfield Group partnership. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time because I thought maybe I was misreading something. The Hartfield Group partnership, my 8 months, my cold calls, my Saturday morning prep sessions, my 3 trips to their regional office to sit across from their procurement team and slowly, carefully build the case for why Caldwell was the right fit. My relationship with their CTO, Neil Hartfield Jr., who initially didn't want to take the meeting and ended up calling me personally when the contract was ready to sign because he said he trusted me specifically. Cody had been in one meeting, the final signing. He showed up in a good suit and shook hands and got photographed. Now it was his partnership, his promotion, his 45% raise. I threw my phone across the kitchen. It hit the wall and landed on the tile, and I stood there breathing for a minute before I picked it up. The screen was fine. I was not. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a beer I didn't finish and thought about what I was actually going to do with this feeling. Because the feeling wasn't just anger. It was something more specific than that. It was the particular frustration of a man who has spent his entire career doing things the right way and has just watched someone take everything he built and walk away with it, clean, with applause. The next morning, Elliot Drum sent me a text. Elliot was an IT systems administrator at Caldwell. Quiet guy, early 40s, the kind of person who knew everything about how the company actually functioned because he was the one who kept the systems running. We'd gotten along for years. He'd once spent 2 hours on a Saturday recovering a corrupted presentation file for me, an hour before a board meeting, and I'd brought him a bottle of good bourbon the following Monday. We weren't close friends, but we were the kind of coworkers who actually respected each other. His text said, "You see the announcement? There's something else you should know. Call me when you can." I stared at it for a while. Part of me didn't want to call. Part of me had already started the mental process of detaching from Caldwell entirely, telling myself that the healthiest thing was to move forward and stop looking back at a place that had just thrown me away. Calling Elliot meant pulling that thread, meant getting back into it. I called him. He picked up on the second ring and immediately lowered his voice the way people do when they're at work and saying something they don't want anyone nearby to hear. "I've been doing server migration work," he said, "routine transition stuff since the restructuring, and I found something in the process. Email chains. Coming out of Cody's work account, Walter, he's been forwarding internal files to outside addresses for over a year." I didn't say anything. "Pricing strategies," Elliot continued. "Client contact lists, product roadmaps. I've gone through enough of it to know it's not accidental and it's not one time. It's systematic. 2 different competitor domains showing up in the recipients. Over 180 emails going back 14 months. I sat down. "You're sure it's him?" I said. "His name, his work account, his sent folder?" Elliot said, "I'm sure." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing carefully on the other end. "I can't be the one to take this anywhere," he said. "I've got 2 kids. One of them starts college next year. If I go to HR and Cody figures out it was me, I'm done. And his father is on the board, Walter. You know how that goes. I knew exactly how that went. Can you get me copies?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I already made them," he said, "but we can't meet anywhere near the office or anywhere someone might recognize us." We worked it out over the next 10 minutes. He would leave a USB drive in a waterproof zip bag taped to the underside of a specific bench at a park about 1.5 miles from the office. Green bench near the east entrance, second one from the fountain. He'd leave it there Thursday morning before 7. I'd pick it up. I was there at 6:40 Thursday morning, walking like I was just getting some air. The bag was exactly where he said it would be. I put it in my jacket pocket and kept walking for another 20 minutes before I got in my car. When I got home and plugged the drive into my laptop, I sat there for almost an hour just going through it. 183 emails. Some were brief, just attached files with a short line of context. Others were longer, more conversational, written in the easy tone of someone who had been doing this long enough to feel comfortable. Product specs, client vulnerability assessments, internal pricing models built on data our sales team had spent years collecting. The payments weren't in the emails themselves, but there were references. Account numbers mentioned in passing. Phrases like the usual arrangement and as discussed separately. Whoever was on the receiving end knew exactly what they were getting and what they were paying for. The last email in the chain was dated 3 days before our firing. It said, "Need to clean up overhead this quarter to keep margins clean. We'll handle Friday." We were the overhead. I sat with that for a long time. Then I printed everything, 3 full copies. put one in a folder in my home office, one in my car, and held onto the third while I started thinking about what came next, because I knew one thing clearly. Walking into Caldwell with a USB drive and a stack of printed emails was not going to work. I was a fired employee. They would hear disgruntled and stop listening before I finished the first sentence. Gerald Harlan would make sure of that. I needed to build something they couldn't dismiss. I needed people. I picked up the phone and called Nadine Flowers first. Nadine picked up on the third ring. I told her I needed her eyes on a contract and that I couldn't explain everything over the phone. She didn't ask many questions. She just said to send it over and give her 2 days. Nadine Flowers had spent 9 years at Caldwell as a compliance officer before she ended up in the same parking lot the rest of us did. Before that, she'd worked at a mid-sized law firm for 6 years doing contract review. She understood legal language the way a mechanic understands an engine, not just what the words said, but what they were designed to do and what could go wrong if someone had put the wrong part in on purpose. I still had a copy of the Hartfield Group contract in my personal email from when I'd been managing the negotiation. I forwarded the full document to Nadine and waited. She called me back in 48 hours, earlier than I expected. Section 11.8, she said, no hello, no preamble. What about it? It grants Hartfield's IT team unrestricted access to Caldwell's internal systems for the purpose of integration and ongoing maintenance. No defined time limit, no scope restriction, no audit requirement. She paused. Walter, this is not standard language. Not even close. A clause like this doesn't end up in a contract by accident. Someone wrote it in deliberately and made sure it didn't get flagged. I asked her what it meant practically. It means that from the moment that contract was signed, Hartfield's technical team has had the legal right to access Caldwell's internal infrastructure whenever they want for as long as they want, without any oversight. If a competitor wanted ongoing access to everything inside Caldwell's systems, this is how you'd build it. You'd use a legitimate partner as the vehicle and write the access into the contract so it looks routine. I thought about the emails on the USB drive, the references to account numbers and ongoing arrangements. The 14 months of forwarded files, the emails were how Cody had been selling information directly. Section 11.8 was the infrastructure he'd built for sustained systematic access. 2 methods running in parallel. One for quick transfers, one for permanent reach. How long has the contract been active? Nadine asked. I checked my records. The signing date put the contract at 176 days active. So for nearly 6 months, she said, whoever has been using that access has had an open door into Caldwell's systems. Client data, product development files, financial projections, all of it. I thanked her and sat with that for a while. Then I called Sandra Okafor. Sandra was still in contact with a few people inside the finance department. She was careful about it, kept things informal, but she had relationships that went back years. I told her what I was looking for. Any pattern of internal projects losing ground unexpectedly, clients backing out without clear reasons, product launches that got overtaken by competitors on unusually short timelines. She called me back 10 days later from a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, she said, I borrowed my neighbor's phone. Just listen. There was a pattern. 5 separate projects over the previous 14 months. In each case, Caldwell had developed something new, announced it internally, and within 6 to 8 weeks, a direct competitor had launched a nearly identical product at a lower price point. The most recent was a logistics platform called the Renfield System. My project? I had spent 4 months on the architecture and another 2 months on the client pitch deck. It had been canceled 3 weeks after I was fired because a competitor had released the same concept, same features, lower cost, 5 times in 14 months. Sandra said, the timing is too consistent to be coincidence. I had everything I needed to build a real case. Emails proving Cody had been forwarding confidential information to competitors for 14 months. Contract language creating a deliberate backdoor for sustained system access that had been active for 176 days. A clear financial damage pattern across 5 stolen projects. I had Elliot's documentation, Nadine's contract analysis, and Sandra's internal pattern data. What I didn't have was anyone willing to listen to it. I was a fired employee. The moment I walked into Caldwell's legal department or went to the board, Gerald Harlan would make sure the conversation ended before it started. He had been protecting his son for years, and he wasn't going to stop because a former director showed up with a folder. I needed someone the board couldn't dismiss. Someone with standing, with history, with enough weight that walking away from what he knew would be harder than sitting across the table and dealing with it. That's when I thought of Harvey Stanton. Harvey had been chief operating officer at Caldwell Dynamics for 18 years. He'd built more of that company's actual operational infrastructure than anyone still working there. About 2 years before I was fired, he'd been pushed out. The official story was that he'd retired. Everyone who'd been there long enough knew that the current CEO had engineered his exit after Harvey had pushed back one too many times on decisions he thought were reckless. Harvey had left quietly because he was that kind of man, but quiet didn't mean he'd forgotten. I found a contact through a former colleague and sent a short message. I told him I had something he needed to see, and that it involved the board and the current state of the company. I kept it vague enough that it wouldn't alarm anyone if the wrong person read it. He agreed to meet me for coffee downtown on a Wednesday morning. Harvey Stanton was in his late 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of steady, unhurried manner that comes from spending decades in rooms where people were paid to be loud, and he'd learned that the quieter voice usually wins. He sat across from me at a corner table with his hands around a coffee mug and listened to everything I had without interrupting once. When I finished, he looked out the window for a moment. "Gerald Harlan has been covering for that boy since he joined the company," Harvey said. "The board sees what Gerald lets them see." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set a small leather notebook on the table between us. "Dark green cover, corners worn soft with age, 18 years of board meetings," he said. "Every closed session, every decision that didn't make it into the official minutes. Every conflict of interest that got buried because someone at that table didn't want it on the record." He looked at me, including some things about the current CEO that he has spent considerable energy making sure no one remembers. He picked up the notebook and put it back in his pocket. "Tell me what you need," he said. The annual Industry Leadership Gala was scheduled for a Thursday evening, 6 weeks after Harvey and I had our coffee meeting. It was the kind of event that the industry's mid-level and upper management turned out for every year: black tie, downtown hotel ballroom, the sort of room where people collected business cards and talked about disruption over shrimp cocktail. Cody had been nominated for Emerging Executive of the Year, his first major public appearance as EVP, his coronation basically. The timing could not have been better. Harvey had a former colleague who handled AV coordination for corporate events at that venue. They had worked together years ago when Harvey was still at Caldwell and the company had hosted its own functions there. Harvey reached out quietly, explained that he wanted to arrange a private presentation as part of the evening, and handled the logistics through channels that had nothing to do with Cody or the current Caldwell management. The venue contact had no reason to ask many questions. Harvey was a known name in the industry and he carried himself like a man who did not need to explain himself. Elliot, working remotely from his home on a laptop that had no connection to anything Caldwell-related, helped configure a simple remote display setup. Nothing complicated. A secondary input routed into the main presentation system with a manual trigger. The kind of thing that looks like a technical glitch from the outside until you realize the glitch is organized and knows exactly what it wants to show you. Nadine prepared a one-page summary document. Clean, factual, no editorial language. Just the facts, the contract clause, the timeline, and the numbers. The kind of document that a lawyer or a board member or a federal investigator could read in 3 minutes and understand completely. I spent the 2 days before the gala going over everything twice, not because I was nervous about whether the evidence was solid. I was past that. I went over it because I wanted to be sure every number was right, every date was accurate, every claim was supportable. When this came out, and it was going to come out, I didn't want anyone to find a single thing they could point to and call into question. On the evening of the gala, I wore a dark suit I hadn't worn since a client dinner 2 years earlier. I drove downtown, parked 2 blocks away, and walked in through the main entrance at 7 o'clock like I was any other industry professional attending a public event. Nobody looked twice. There was no reason they would. The ballroom held about 300 people. Round tables with white linens, a raised stage at the far end, a screen behind the podium that was currently showing a slow rotation of sponsor logos. Gerald Harlan was seated at a table near the front with 2 other board members and their spouses. He was in a good mood, you could tell from across the room. Neil Hartfield Jr., the CTO of the Hartfield Group, was at a table 2 rows back. He had flown in for the event specifically because Cody had invited him as a guest, presenting it as a celebration of their partnership. Neil was a decent man who had trusted me during the negotiation and who had no idea that the contract his team had signed contained language that had been used as an instrument against the company he represented. He was going to find that out tonight, and I was not happy about the fact that he would be sitting in a public room when he did. But there was no other way to do this that would actually work. Harvey was already in the room when I arrived, standing near the bar talking to 2 people I didn't recognize, relaxed and easy, the picture of a retired executive enjoying an industry evening. He caught my eye for just a moment when I walked in and gave no reaction at all. Good man. I found a seat near the back with a clear view of the stage and the front tables, and I waited. The awards portion of the evening started at 8. 3 awards before Cody's. I sat through all of them, an older woman accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award who gave a gracious 2-minute speech. A team from a logistics firm getting recognized for a safety initiative. A young engineer who looked genuinely surprised and read his thank you notes off his phone. Then the MC stepped back to the podium. Our next honoree has demonstrated exceptional leadership in navigating complex market conditions and securing transformative partnerships for his organization. It is my pleasure to present the Emerging Executive of the Year award to Caldwell Dynamics Executive Vice President Cody Harlan. The applause started. Gerald Harlan was on his feet immediately, clapping with the specific enthusiasm of a father watching his son receive something he had spent years engineering. A few tables near the front joined the standing ovation. Cody came up the steps on the left side of the stage, shook the MC's hand, smiled at the photographer positioned at the foot of the stairs, and stepped to the podium. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the room with the practiced confidence of someone who had been preparing for a moment like this for a long time. "Thank you," he said. "This means a great deal. At Caldwell, we believe that real leadership is about building things that last, about integrity in every decision, every partnership, every relationship we cultivate." He paused for effect. That was when the screen behind him changed. The sponsor logo rotation disappeared. In its place, in clean, readable text against a white background, was an email. Cody Harlan's name and work address in the from field. A domain belonging to one of Caldwell's direct competitors in the to field. The subject line read, Q3 client pricing structure, updated. The timestamp showed 14 months ago. Cody did not notice immediately. He was still looking at the audience, still in the rhythm of his speech. The audience noticed. The murmur started at the tables in the middle of the room. People leaning toward each other, heads turning toward the screen. Someone near the front put a hand on their companion's arm and pointed. Gerald Harlan's expression shifted from pride to confusion in the span of about 4 seconds. Cody caught the change in the room and turned around. He looked at the screen, he looked back at the audience, he looked at the screen again. There seems to be some kind of technical, he started. The screen changed. A second email, this one with a product roadmap attached. Then a third, with a subject line that read, Renfield platform specs as requested. Then section 11.8 of the Hartfield contract filled the screen, the relevant language highlighted in yellow, with a single line printed below it in red text. This backdoor access clause has been active for 176 days. Estimated damage to Caldwell Dynamics, $22 and $4 million. The room was no longer murmuring. People were standing. Someone near the Hartfield table said something sharp and loud that I couldn't make out. Neil Hartfield Jr. was on his feet, his face tight, his phone already in his hand. Gerald Harlan was moving toward the stage. Cody stood at the podium with the microphone still in his hand and did not say a single word. There was nothing to say. Everything he might have said was already on the screen behind him, visible to every person in that room, including reporters from 4 trade publications who had been covering the gala and who were now photographing the screen with considerable urgency. Security reached the AV booth about 90 seconds later and cut the feed. It did not matter. The slides had been up long enough. 300 people had seen them. Phones had captured them. The story was already leaving that room on its own. I walked out during the noise. In the lobby, I passed Harvey near the coat check. He looked at me with the calm expression of a man who had just watched something inevitable finally happen. Outside, the night air was cool. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute and just breathed. Then I went home. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon when I got home. The good bottle I'd been saving for something that warranted it. This warranted it. By the time I finished the glass, my phone had started going. News alerts first, then LinkedIn notifications, then text messages from people I hadn't heard from in months. I turned the phone face down and went to bed. The voicemail started before 7 the next morning, 5 of them from Caldwell's legal department, each one a little more urgent than the last. Then a direct email from the CEO himself, sent at 6:43 a.m. The subject line was, Request for urgent meeting. I made coffee. I read the paper. I responded at noon. I chose the location, a diner 4 blocks from my house, a place I'd been eating breakfast at for 11 years. Small, quiet, good coffee, the kind of place where nobody was going to be impressed by anyone's title. The CEO, the head of legal, and the board chair drove across town and sat down across from me in a corner booth at 2 o'clock that afternoon. All 3 of them looked like men who had not slept, which was accurate. The CEO started talking immediately, the way people do when they're uncomfortable with silence and think filling it gives them some kind of control. Walter, first I want to say that the board takes this situation with complete seriousness, and we are fully committed to a thorough. I put a folder on the table and let it sit there until he stopped talking. Those are my terms, I said. Take your time reading them. 5 pages. I had written them over the previous 3 weeks, which tells you something about how confident I was that this moment was coming. All 14 fired employees reinstated with full back pay and formal written apologies on company letterhead. Walter Pruitt returns to Caldwell Dynamics as Vice President of Corporate Integrity. reporting directly to the board, with explicit veto authority over any partnership contracts or vendor agreements flagged as problematic. Gerald Harlan steps down from the board within 30 days. An independent third-party audit of all executive compensation decisions going back 3 years. A restructured ethics reporting process with protections for anyone who brings forward concerns about senior leadership. The head of legal looked up from the second page. Some of these conditions are quite broad in scope. Yes, I said. There are aspects of the compensation audit that would require, I know what they require, I said. That's why it's in there. The CEO looked at the board chair. The board chair looked at his coffee cup. We'd like to discuss a few of the specific terms, the CEO said. The scope of the veto authority, for instance. We think there's a version of that provision that achieves your objective while also the provision is written the way it's written because that's the way it needs to be written, I said. I spent 14 years watching contracts come through that division with language designed to look routine and mean something else entirely. The veto authority is broad because the problem was broad. Silence. You have until 9 tomorrow morning, I said. After that, I take a meeting with one of 3 outside firms that contacted me in the last 18 hours. I'd imagine Harvey Stanton would be willing to join that conversation as well, given everything he documented over 18 years. I didn't say anything else. I picked up my coffee and waited. The CEO called me at 8:51 the next morning. They accepted every condition, all 5 pages. 2 weeks later, I walked back into Caldwell Dynamics, not through the side entrance where security had walked me out with a cardboard box. Through the front door with a new title on the org chart and a direct line to the board that nobody in that building could route around. Phil Greer came back. Sandra Okafor came back. Nadine Flowers came back, which felt right in a specific way since she was the one who had found the clause that cracked the whole thing open. All 14 of them came back with back pay with new titles where appropriate, and with written apologies that I made sure were specific and not the vague corporate non-apology that legal departments prefer. As for Cody, federal investigators had been in contact with Caldwell's legal team within 72 hours of the gala. Corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty. His accounts were frozen inside a week. Gerald Harlan submitted his resignation from the board on day 9, 3 weeks ahead of the deadline I had set. Last I heard, Cody was having significant difficulty finding legal representation willing to take his case, which tends to happen when the evidence against you was displayed on a 15-foot screen in front of 300 people, including 4 journalists. Sometimes when I'm working late in my office now I think about that conference room, the 14 envelopes, the scotch, the smile, nothing personal, just math. He was right that it was math, he just miscounted. He forgot to account for 14 people who had nothing left to lose and nowhere to be. He forgot that the man he called a maintenance guy had spent 14 years learning exactly how every system in that building worked. He forgot that patience is a resource, and that when you take away everything else a methodical person has, what you've actually done is free up all their time. That's not a loose end, that's a problem you just handed to someone who knows how to solve problems. If you've ever been handed that envelope on a Friday afternoon while someone else poured a drink and called it math, then you already know what I'm talking about. You know the specific weight of that moment. You know what it feels like to walk out of a building carrying 14 years in a cardboard box. I'm not here to tell you it always works out the way it did for me, but I'm telling you this. Being underestimated by the wrong person is not the end of your story. The man who thinks you're overhead has already made his biggest mistake. You're not done. You're just getting started.